Hello, and welcome to my next video on Heidegger's Being and Time. And this time I will be talking about the chapter on everydayness and temporality. And it's continued to be another challenging chapter where I've had to go through both Heidegger's writing and the writing from the guide to Being and Time over and over again. And there's so much to this chapter lengthwise, and it's sometimes hard to see what you get out of it in the end, if it really is something new or if I'm just repeating myself at this point. But I decided to not to care too much about that, so if I am repeating myself, then we just have to deal with it. So he wants to go back to what he explained in the first part of the book, what he had called the everydayness. And the everydayness is the usual way that we exist every day. Those normal days that can sometimes blend together and become like the default background of your life, I take it. And that is also what Heidegger is referring to when he uses his, by now, common phrase, initially and for the most part. So he's talking about the structure of this everyday, which is, like he said, it is for the most part what we live through, but it is not the essential part. It is not always the case, but it is also something that we can never escape or get over. Now what we have when we're not in this everyday average way of existing, that is still not so clear to me. And the structures that it brings forth to categorize everydayness seem to be part of whatever is not everydayness as well. I think especially like understanding. If indeed understanding would be part of everydayness, I cannot imagine any state or situation where understanding would not be a part of that. So yeah, that's yet another thing that is not very clear at the moment. But I want to link everydayness and the structures of everydayness to temporality. And temporality and to authenticity in a more clear way. The first part of the book didn't really talk too much about the authentic side, more of the inauthentic side. But the authentic side comes into play when we talk about the facts of our death and our groundlessness or thrownness. And being authentic is going to mean essentially to keep those two points in mind in whatever we do. The fact that we are have a definite end in our future as our final ultimate possibility, and that we are thrown and groundless in that, meaning that we always find ourselves in a situation coming to being from a previous state that we did not choose, but nevertheless is ours, and we have to take that up and realize also that this background that makes us is arbitrary. That it wouldn't have we didn't have to be the way that we are. Things wouldn't have to be the way that they were, but they are, and we have to deal with that sort of terrifying reality. And so the different parts of the everydayness or the disclosedness, which is, I guess, is a part of what I think he means by everydayness, is that things are disclosed. And disclosedness, is itself made up of at least four definite parts. These are understanding, attunement, entanglement or falling, and discourse. So we will go back to those four concepts now. So first, understanding. That is one of those concepts that I had a little bit trouble with before. I would say still do, but I understand it, and I understand understanding a little bit better now. In that wants to say that these different parts of discourse, including understanding, have a certain relationship with temporality. So understanding is primarily associated with the future, with the future, and I don't think this point is very important. Frankly, I don't think saying this adds a lot to our understanding, but it wants to say that understanding is primarily futural, and he says that because understanding is about projecting the possibilities of our being for the sake of which we are, that we are for the sake of this something in our future, which we are always guided towards, and actually the present arises as a way to sort of approach this future. So the present comes out of the future in Heidegger's conception of conceptualization of temporality or Dasein or whatever. So yeah, we understand something projecting possibilities because the possibilities are futural. And the way that we do this authentically, he calls anticipation. Or maybe anticipation at least is part of authentic understanding. It is a broader term than just belonging to understanding itself, but it should belong here also. Now, an inauthentic understanding would be part of what would be called just making present, in which case we just things come into being just to make them be here, but they are not here. They are not the being are not manifest because we are projecting towards this ultimate potential in the future of our death, but in more of a short-term future, I would say. So it's still futural in that sense. I mean, we are making the street present when we want to cross the street because we want to get over the street in the next few minutes for some reason. And of course, as a matter of material objective existence, you know, the ground and the pavements and the street lights or whatever, they're all there, but they come into being in, well, our perception. Again, that is not the way Heidegger would use it, but that's the way it's easiest to explain. They come into our perception because we are concerned with our being in a certain way, that we want something for ourselves because we want something in the future. So that's understanding. Then we have attunement, or the moods, another concept that I have a lot of issues with, but I won't go into it right now. And attunement is primarily in the past, or what Heidegger calls primarily in the having been. And this justification for why this is not very satisfactory to me. Sorry to be so critical all the way through, but yeah, I feel like I needed a better justification for than what he gives, or it's just not clear to me from his writing. But at least I think the connection is that attunement is a way that why things show up in a certain theme, you could say, or moods are not emotions, but he uses the words of emotions to describe moods. So attunements of like fear and hope, stuff like that. We get a hopeful or fearful mood over us, and that informs our understanding. And the way that why these are primarily rooted in having been, must be linked to kind of the same as our thrownness, really, that we sort of have to take over something from the past which we ourselves did not give rise to or decide on what, or decide to, but these sort of just come to us. And likewise, these moods are not something that we decide for ourselves. These are just, they come over us from somewhere else, involuntarily, which is why they are behaving similarly to thrownness. And I guess that's the only way that they can be connected to having been, rather than the other ecstasies of temporality. And I should say that all of these different parts of disclosedness, they may be primarily connected with one of the ecstasies of temporality, but they are all of them are always participating in all three ecstasies simultaneously all the time. And that's partly why I don't think that understanding which ones are primarily here or there is not super interesting to me. But it brings back the kind of the key attunements that he had brought up before, which are anxiety, which is an authentic attunement, and then it brings up the attunement of fear, which is an inauthentic attunement. And why fear, at least, is inauthentic is that it focuses on the things in the world which we are afraid of, and it hides the sort of true danger of the ungroundedness of our being and the fact that we ultimately will die in the future. While I would say that the ungroundedness is what is primarily driving the danger in anxiety. But fear is just, well, we're fearing for this lion that might eat me. Even though of course you could, that of course is linked to your death in some way, but it's like an immediate death that can be avoided, while anxiety is about death that is unavoidable at some point. Then they have the entanglement or falling prey. I'm not sure if these terms are equivalent, but they are kind of used equivalently, which is the way that we are caught up in the world and the things that we take care of, and we become absorbed by the things that we take care of and sort of define ourselves by them instead of our existential structures, our being. And so falling doesn't have anything like an authentic mode. It is always inauthentic. At least he tries to say that, but then he goes on a line of thinking that kind of hints that there might be kind of an authentic way of, well, maybe not of falling an entanglement, but okay. So within falling, there is the concept of curiosity, which is the way that we aimlessly search for things around us that are novel, but we don't try to understand them. We see just for the sake of seeing, not because we want to understand them in some deeper sense. And we're just looking for novelty. On the other hand, he talks about the scientific view, where we actually look at things to find the objective present at hand, not present at hand, or I forget now if it is present at hand or another term, but objective, making things appear in their objective presence and doing viewing the world deliberately for that purpose. And that type of looking around and like scanning the world, observing the world, he does say this is an authentic way of being. So it kind of seems like there is no authentic folly, but there is an authentic way of looking around, of observing things in the world, while not yourself becoming absorbed in them and defining yourself by them, as in, I am a person who sits in a chair, who cooks food, who crosses the street, who takes the bus to work, instead of having in view this, your being, your death and your thrownness and your all these things. And the last part of disclosedness is discord, which is not super well developed in Being and Time, because discord is, of course, concerned with language, and language is not. I think it's one of those things that were perhaps deferred to part 3 of Being and Time, which was never published. And so discourse also doesn't have. It's kind of primarily for the present. You're making things, present, making them present through discourse and language. And what discourse is this structure of our being, which we can make intelligible, with it we can break up and communicate with others. And importantly, his term for discourse, it's not that, discourse is the precondition of language to Heidegger. So when we use language, those are built on a foundation of what he calls discourse, which are pre-linguistic, but still breaks up the world through the network of significance and relevance into these distinct pieces that we can add language on top of. That's how I understand it. And then we can go over just temporality itself and the different moments or different ecstasies and the authentic/inauthentic modes. And again, this might be a bit of a repetition even in this video, I realize, but that's just how things are going to have to be. So for the future, it can to have of course, to Heidegger, the future, the present, and having been the past, these are things that happen simultaneously. These are things that are together make your whole being possible at every single moment. So it's not that it's not this line where the present or the past comes first, and then the present, and then the future. But this is a structure that always exists and give rise to your whole being. But when we are authentic, the future is what it takes the shape, or the future becomes what he calls this anticipation. We are anticipating, or this anticipation assumes that we are running forward towards this ultimate possibility of our death, of our non-being, and sort of embracing that, and again, not, as I was trying to explain in the previous video, that running towards death does not mean that we seek out death, that we want to die, but that we keep that possibility in mind when we act forward and project our future. Given that this event is unavoidable, how should I act in the face of that? While the inauthentic future is what he something he calls the awaiting. We are sort of awaiting for something to come to us, to happen to us, for some event before we can take action. It's something that is in the future and we're expecting to come to us, and when this event comes to us, that is when we will act. So we're not really taking charge of our own lives at that point. Then we have the present. And as I was saying earlier, the inauthentic present is what he calls making present. And this is just to this everyday mode that we bring objects really into the here now existence through our immediate engagement with the world. But we and this is sort of the inauthentic present is that is where falling sort of comes from. That we get so invested and engaged with all these things around us in our immediate world that we forget ourselves, really. We forget our being, and we tend to think of the world as these objective presence things, because that's the making present is sort of making stuff appear to you. So we think that the world is mainly just stuff. But the authentic present is what he calls the moment. And that is the present where you take these two factors. We realize these factors of your thrownness and your death, and embrace those things. And when you embrace those, or when you realize those things, it is the course of action in the moment that reveals itself to you as appropriate, given your existence as Dasein. And you know, what sort of thing could that be? I think it's in a movie cliche thing, or movie cliche way of saying things. It's when you sort of ask yourself, okay, well, what do I actually want? Instead of asking, what is the thing that one should do in this situation? When you're making sort of like a key decision for your life, what is that you deeply actually want? Given that you have your background and you have this openness of the future, which is nevertheless constrained by your ultimate end. Then, having been is going to, the inauthentic having been is going to be called forgetfulness. And what we are forgetting here is, again, we're simply forgetting the groundlessness of our existence. We are forgetting that things could have been different for us. Could have been we could have been a different person. We could have come from a different background. Things could have happened in a different way than they were. But in the end, they weren't. You have this past. You have this person, sort of, that or life that you're thrown into and have to deal with and own. And even though it's called forgetfulness, it is the moment where we just think of our past as scattered events, which we do not forget. We do remember them, but we would define ourselves as by those events and not by the existential structure of thrownness. And on the other hand, authentic having been is called retrieval or repetition, and that is going to be simply put to remember your thrownness. I don't feel like I need to say or can say much more than that, really. And in the same chapter, he is asking another bigger question of how is the transcendental world possible? And I guess the world is ultimately linked to everydayness, but I don't see how it can be not part of anything outside of everydayness as well. But he has put it in the same chapter at the very least. How is a transcendent world possible? And it's going to be yet another theme that is not fully developed in Being and Time. And it's going to be reserved for part 3, which was never published. But in this part, he brings up the concept of horizontal schemas or schemes of the past, present, and future that puts a limit on or guides how these things manifest, which I guess is another way of asking, like, how does the world come into being, and what are the things that structure how it appears as the way that it appears. And so I guess, the ultimate possibility of death is, of course, like one very definite point that structures our projection into the future. But he's saying that the thing that guides the projection of the future is our for the sake of which, and this and it's like a concept, but it uses these multiple words with connected lines between them, for the sake of which. So that is the thing that also guides our the projection of our possibilities. Why they projected the way that they were? Well, for the sake of which something. And why are things guided the way that they appear in the present? Well, in the present we are usually engaged with stuff and with tools and doing things. And the thing that guides the structure of the present is the in order to. So the in order to is his thing that structures the present, which is kind of, I guess, self-explanatory. The past, though, the having been, that is more difficult, and I don't understand exactly why this is or what this is. So our past, or our having been, is structured by that in the face of which is like, well, it's in the face of our thrownness. But it's hard to say or view that as like something that guides or shapes our view of our past, really. That's still very unclear to me. And again, these are all underdeveloped concepts that would have been the topic of a new edition. And it wants to also connect the use of tools to temporality. And so tools are again part of a system of relevance. A tool can never exist as a separate tool, but they're always linked to other tools in a network of some sort. And the structure of significance and relevance, maybe those are the same thing, maybe there is a difference. I'm going to use them as the same thing. That is guided by our own, for the sake of which, because we're using the tools for some end, and that end is important to us, and we care about ourselves in our being, and which is why we make these tools come into being. So already there, by connecting it to our being, to our care structure, you may see why the perception of tools is linked to temporality and therefore through time. And actually, he says that we are often awaiting tools in certain places, which is of course a temporal idea. And speaking of places, he also wants to link spatiality to temporality. That spatiality is made possible through temporality, and that temporality has a primary relation to spatiality. But not the way as someone like Immanuel Kant would say. I think in his philosophy, spatiality becomes is something that we observe through events, and events has to happen in time. And so, although of course, like a still if you would think of a still image, you would still observe spatiality. I mean, you could still see spatial relations in a still image, or whatever. It's different from Kant, at the very least, he says. The way that that spatiality shows up through temporality in Heidegger's system. Well, yeah, I guess it's an extension of the what I said about tools, really. So through temporality, we gain the projection of our being, of our future, and what we want, and what for the sake of ourselves. And there we see tools to meet those ends, and those tools are we see as sort of available to us or unavailable to us, and that relation of available or being unavailable or being distant, that is what creates the sense of spatial relations. And that sense of spatial relations is or spatiality. And that sense of spatiality of being closer or nearer or too far away or whatever, that is the foundation on which we build like objective space like measurements of things. And yeah, this is about what has been about the everydayness of Dasein. And he ends the chapter by talking about how this everydayness as an extended thing can exist, because our everyday life is sort of made up of days that are kind of similar to each other. You know, most of us have, you know, a home which we go home to every night, and we have a routine, and we have, you know, common, like the store that we go to for grocery shopping, and the same people that we encounter during the day. And so this everyday phenomenon is actually something that is stretched across time. It's a stretched out thing, and he wants to ask, how is this like entity stretched across time made possible? And that's he's going to talk about in the next chapter, what is called historicity. But that's for the next video. Thanks for watching.